It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here, as always. Well, actually, you know what? Steve said it was kind of a slow week. There's still, it seems to me, plenty to talk about. We'll start with a look at ServiceNSW's new driver's license. Steve talked about how insecure it was last week. This week, their response. You won't believe it. ExpressVPN is the first VPN to pull out of India. We'll tell you why there's a critical cellular modem chip defect. Does anybody care? And then Steve is going to look at Passkeys once again in light of Apple's announcement that they're going to support it. What is the key critical deficiency of Passkeys? Steve identifies it coming up next on Security Now.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 874, recorded Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. Passkeys, take 2. Security Now is brought to you by IT Pro TV. Give your team an engaging IT development platform to level up their skills. Volume discounts start at 5 seats. Go to itpro.tv/securitynow. And make sure to mention SN30 to your designated IT Pro TV account executive to get 30% off or more on a business plan. And by Jumpcloud, your complete platform for identity access and device management. Work smarter, not harder, by securing SSO, MDM, MFA, and more from one pane of glass. Fully evaluate Jumpcloud for free today at cloud.jumpcloud.com/securitynow and help your organization move to a modern, secure, hybrid work model. And by Bitwarden. Get the password manager that offers a robust, cost-effective solution that can drastically increase your chances of staying safe online. Get started with a free trial of Teams or Enterprise plan and get started for free across all devices as an individual user at bitwarden.com/twit. It's time for Security Now, the show where we protect you, your loved ones, your privacy, your wallet online with this guy right here, Steve Gibson from GRC.com. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Leo. Great to be with you again for, what is this? This is the first, first
June.
episode of June.
Yeah.
First
Hard to believe.
Of June.
How did we get here?
I know. So, I, along with you and Micah, watched and enjoyed yesterday's Worldwide Developer Conference keynote. And I saw in passing their mention of passkeys. And something occurred to me that I hadn't thought about before, and I initially put it in miscellany because it didn't seem that big a deal. But the more I thought about it and wrote about it, the more I realized that there might be something significant that we're just all kind of glossing over while we're rejoicing about Apple, Google, and Microsoft adopting this technology. So, and it was kind of a slow week, which doesn't happen that often in security. Yeah.
It's the only show where we celebrate slow weeks.
And so I was sort of thinking, well, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. So we have things to talk about. We're going to talk about the response that Service New South Wales provided about their response to all of the news, which we covered last week, of their very insecure, apparently hard to spoof, so they said, digital driver's license. ExpressVPN is the first VPN to pull the plug on India. We're going to talk about that.
Our sponsor,
Yeah. Also, turning off the internet has turned out to become a common practice among some repressive regimes.
Oh, yeah.
For an interesting reason. The Windows Follina exploit, Follina, Italy, we talked about that. It has exploded into the wild, not surprisingly. Yeah. And there's another Windows Word URL scheme, which has been uncovered, which could be exploited. We've got a critical cellular modem chip defect, which has surfaced, and maybe I'm the only one who's not worried about it. We'll see. Also, we've got an interesting consequence of U.S. sanctions, which is that named ransomware is being impacted as a consequence. And also, in a separate story, ransomware is beginning. We have, as a consequence of these Conti leaks, we learned that some new development in the ransomware sphere is taking aim at our systems boot firmware, at the UEFI, which is not where we want them going next, but they're going to. We've got a bit of Errata and a bit of closing the loop feedback. Then we're going to talk about, I titled today's podcast Passkeys Take 2 because 4 weeks ago it was the title of the podcast, and I need a little bit of follow-up that I think all of our listeners will find very interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. One of our listeners, Redacted in the chat room, has noted that on your show notes, at least on the Mac interprets this number 874 for 6722 as a phone number. And I don't know what will happen if I dial it, but I don't think I will. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
Yes. I'd never noticed that before. Thank you, Redacted. I don't know what country code that is.
I have noticed, and I've never asked you about this, that I've noticed that sometimes on my pad at least, Safari doesn't show the symbols that other browsers show. They got these little missing icon squares. Like why is this hard?
It's a font thing, Steve.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that whatever font you're using there, it doesn't have those Unicode characters. I think, honestly, by now, every font should have. But there's potentially, I think, 65,000 Unicode characters. I mean, it's just such a large number. You're not going to, you don't want to put that all in a font set. So occasionally some wingdings get turned into squares.
Yeah, you need to have the add-on ROM if you put that.
Yeah, no kidding. Every font's 100 megabytes. Our show today brought to you by IT Pro TV. I know you know IT Pro TV. I know many of you are members of IT Pro TV, the best place for IT training. We always talk about what a great idea it is for individuals to become IT professionals through IT Pro TV. We don't talk a lot about the business side of this, but IT Pro TV has a business plan that's great for your IT team. Just like individuals, your IT team needs to keep its skills up. It needs to keep its certs up. It needs to learn new skills. And with IT Pro TV, you're going to give them something they'll actually use, and then it'll benefit your business. So it's a win all around. IT Pro TV makes content that is so engaging, so entertaining, and yet so informative. People love it. In fact, on average, 80% of users who start a video finish it, go all the way through, which is always a good sign. They don't bail out halfway through. IT Pro TV's got great content because they have great trainers. They call them edutainers, people who are experts in the field and who have a passion for what they're talking about. That passion comes through and makes it more exciting, more interesting to watch them, more engaging. They always have fun while they're doing it. So your team will be learning and enjoying. All of the episodes are cut up into 20 and 30-minute chunks they can watch during a lunch hour or a break. They're binge-worthy content. Will get them trained in every area you need for your IT team. I mean, honestly, if you're not continuously training, you're falling behind. The tech industry is constantly evolving, right? There's new threats, new software, new certs, new questions for the old certs. There's new system upgrades. There's new cyber threats. IT Pro TV offers the training and perspective that you need to handle this modern world of technology. Your IT team deserves IT Pro TV, and you deserve an IT team trained up to handle any eventuality. You can get all the training and certifications for your team done in one place. Every vendor, every skill you need for IT team training, Microsoft, of course, Cisco, Linux, Apple training, security training, cloud, so much more. A total of 5,800 hours worth of engaging, up-to-date content. And I mean it when I say up-to-date. They have 7 studios running all day, so the content's always getting updated. It moves from the studio to the library within 24 hours. You're looking at the absolute freshest information. And, of course, the IT Pro TV business plan has a dashboard that makes it great and easy for you to justify the spend. You can track your team's results, manage seats, assign and unassigned team members to different content. You can access monthly usage reports. And by the way, it's not just the whole track. You can pick an individual episode, say, well, you need to learn more about this. Or they may come to you. In fact, honestly, this is more likely. I want to learn more about crypto. Great. IT Pro TV. You can have all the metrics you need to justify to the boss why you're spending that money. And you'll have a team that is really up to date and very, very effective. It's a money saver in the long run. They spend less time solving problems. They solve more problems. You could assign full courses, individual episodes. You'll get insights into your team's viewing patterns, their progress, great visual reports so you can print up a report and say, see, boss, this is worth it. IT Pro TV. Individual plans, yes, we talk about that all the time, but don't forget your IT team. Give them the development platform they need to level up their skills while enjoying the journey. For teams from 2 to 1,000, IT Pro TV's got something for you. Volume discounts start at just 5 seats. And if you go to itpro.tv/securitynow, itpro.tv/securitynow, and mention SN30 to your IT Pro TV account executive, 30% off or more on a business plan. No one gives a 30% discount. That's a great deal. itpro.tv/securitynow. And that's just because you're hearing this on Security Now. But do use that offer code SN30 because you'll get the 30%, but also Steve will get the credit. itpro.tv/securitynow. Offer code SN30. Picture of the week, Mr. Gibson?
Yeah. So this is not, highbrow, but it's just a fun little ditty. So the caption on this picture reads, "I don't get it. We keep changing. We keep changing the password, and we still have a leak." And so, and the picture is 2 people standing in front of a corporate bulletin board where, like in 48-point type, it says today's security access code 55523, and again, yes, yeah. Wonder where that leak could possibly be occurring. That's a mystery. Anyway, okay, so in a follow-up to the quite unflattering coverage the tech press, including this podcast, gave to the New South Wales ridiculously insecure digital driver's license, someone over at ServiceNSW was told that they needed to offer a rebuttal. So here's the official reply from ServiceNSW. Starts out, this issue, and like which issue, like take your pick, this issue is known and does not pose a risk to customer information. Okay. The blogger has manipulated their own digital driver's license information on their local device.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The no other customer data or data source has been compromised.
Oh, they thought it was a breach or something.
Okay.
Completely misunderstood it. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. It also does not pose any risk in regard to unauthorized access or changes to back-end systems such as drives. And of course, no one ever said it did, but it's good that it doesn't. Then they said, importantly, if the tampered license was scanned by police, the real-time check used by NSW police, and they said scanning Mobipol, would show the correct personal information as it calls on drives. So drives is apparently the name of their back-end database.
Oh, you mean like a physical
system.
driver's license?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we did this.
Oh, then they said upon scanning the license, it would be clear to law enforcement that it has been tampered with. Right? Since nothing that's being displayed can be trusted. So the offline aspect of this is apparently not very useful.
So they're basically saying, well, just don't trust it. Okay.
And, but Leo, here's the kicker.
Oh.
Altering the DDL is against the law.
Oh, no.
So
no one would do
then.
that.
No one.
A lot of law-abiding people there.
So, it's kind of like a fake ID, which I would imagine is also against the law, but no one's ever used one of those. Finally, the DDL has been, fortunately, independently assessed by cyber specialists and is more secure than the plastic card. Yeah, exactly. Like, okay, were these by chance the same cyber specialists who came up with the system's design in the first place?
Our geeks tell us it's safe.
And really, what does more secure than the plastic card mean? How can the security of a physical card be compared against a software solution? After all, everyone always says that all software has bugs. A physical card doesn't have software bugs. Seems like that might be more secure. And, of course, we talked last week about the difficulty of acquiring the paper and the printer. And apparently it's got some multi-layer laminated sandwich with a different color. So you look at the side of the card and you see a little orange stripe or something. Anyway, at least now we know why nothing happened 3 years ago, back in 2019, when the egregious and completely avoidable problems with this system were first publicly displayed. ServiceNSW apparently employed the now famous "these are not the droids you're looking for" diversion by claiming that, the DDL system is working exactly the way we intended, and you all just don't understand why this is what we want. So,
that is such a cover-your-ass response. Unbelievable.
It really is. Yeah, well, government here to help you. Okay. ExpressVPN, as you reminded our listeners, a sponsor of the TWiT network, has last Thursday announced that it would be removing all of its India-based VPN servers in response to a new cybersecurity directive issued by the Indian CERT, the Indian Computer Emergency Response Team. However, that doesn't necessarily mean, they said, that users of ExpressVPN will be out of luck. ExpressVPN wrote that, quote, "Rest assured, our users will still be able to connect to VPN servers that will give them Indian IP addresses and allow them to access the internet as if they were located in India."
How do they, I guess the pool, that's interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. As long as you were able to route those IPs.
But you could put a router there. Not a server.
Else.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Right. So they said these virtual India servers will instead be physically located in Singapore and in the UK. Okay, so what happened? CERT India will be enforcing new controversial data retention requirements that are set to come into effect 3 weeks from today on June 27th. These new rules require VPN service providers to store subscribers' real names, contact details, and IP addresses assigned to them for at least 5 years. India's CERT stated that the user data being logged will only be requested for the purposes of cyber incident response, which of course could be anything, protective and preventative actions related to cyber incidents, unquote. So India CERT, after I'm sure a lot of pushback, they clarified that this rule does not apply to corporate and enterprise VPN solutions, and they're only aimed at those operators who provide proxy-like services to, quote, general internet subscribers/users, unquote. In other words, to any and all VPN service providers. In their statement, ExpressVPN said, the new data law intended to fight cybercrime is incompatible with the purpose of VPNs, which are designed to keep users' online activity private. The law is also overreaching and so broad as to open up the window for potential abuse. And in addition to the new rules, which are called cybersecurity directions, they also require firms to report incidents of security lapses, such as data breaches and ransomware attacks, within 6 hours of noticing them. You know, I think in the U.S., what was it, 72? So 6 hours in India. India's move has not only sparked privacy concerns, but has been criticized as ambiguous and overly broad, with many pointing out a lack of clarity on the scope of incidents that come under purview of this upcoming directive. Excuse me. In a statement, the Internet Freedom Foundation said, quote, such excessive requirements for collecting and handing over data will not just impact VPN service providers, but VPN users as well, harming their individual liberty and privacy. In the absence of sufficient oversight and a data protection framework to protect against misuse, such requirements have the potential to enable mass surveillance, which, you know, has got to be what's actually going on here. You know, and unfortunately, this feels more like the future which we're heading toward than the past we are receding from, or that is receding from us. You know, governments are increasingly becoming uncomfortable with the idea of having no means to surveil their citizens and others who reside within their borders. So, you know, the great decryption debate is far from over. And speaking of pulling the plug, what do Algeria, Iraq, Jordan, Sudan, India, and Syria all have in common? Their governments have reacted to out-of-control cheating on tests by high school students by completely shutting down their national internet service during the periods of time that tests are being taken.
Oh, go try that here. Holy moly.
I know.
Oh,
I was thinking the same thing, Leo. Can you imagine that? Like, you know, I mean, you couldn't, it must be, although I don't think it is really, but you'd have to imagine that those countries' use of the internet is sort of, you know, circumstantial or not core. As you said, you could not do that in the United States. No. But anyway, so the most recent instance of this occurred last week, two actually, and this week in Syria, which scheduled a series of 4 planned outages, each lasting 3.5 hours. The first 2 occurred, as I said, last week, and the next 2, actually one is set for today and one on the 12th. The outages are performed via BGP by removing Syria's routing from the global internet.
That's one way to stop cheating. Holy cow.
Thus cutting it off completely from the rest of the world.
That's mind-boggling.
It is. In this day and age, Leo, I mean, and that's why you think that the only way it could be possible would be that it's just like Syria doesn't depend on the internet to the degree that we do. But how could that be? Anyway, prior to Syria implementing these exam blackouts, which began in 2016, it turns out, I mean, this actually was a problem. Test questions would begin appearing on social media sites 30 to 60 minutes before each exam, thus allowing cheating students to circulate correct answers and compromise the integrity of the tests. So now, as hundreds of thousands of Syrian high school students sit to take their national exams, Syria is taking the extreme proctoring measure of shutting down national internet access. Wow. The pressure on Syrian students is great. since their performance on these standardized tests largely determines what higher education options they will have access to, which in turn largely controls their economic futures. Doug Mattery, the director of Internet and Analysis at Kentic, said, "The stakes for the exams are so high that there's an assumption that everyone is cheating." So the exam blackouts operate in Syria both by blocking, well, actually, if you pull out BGP, hardwired and mobile internet access in the hours before the exams, as paper tests are printed and physically distributed across the country. So in order to minimize leakage, they already print, the ink is still wet on these things when the students get them in order to keep them from escaping. And they went one step further and just pulled their BGP routing from the internet. And as I said, the strategy is not only being used in Syria. Iraq previously drew criticism from digital human rights groups for ordering local internet providers to shut down during school exams in the summer of 2015. The academic-related internet shutdowns have been reported in India as well. And last year, more than 25 million people faced a mobile internet shutdown in the Indian state of Rajasthan during a local teacher eligibility exam. So I guess even the teachers were cheating. Amazing.
Well, that's what happens when you have these high-stakes exams.
Yes. Yes.
France does this. A lot of countries do this. They're all at the same time on the same day in the countrywide, which is why they can shut down the whole country. But,
right.
I guess there's a agreement among the citizenry that this is important. We're going to do this right.
We're just all going to,
we're going to bite the bullet. And, that's pretty wild. Wow. So Follina, I just love that name, is under active exploitation. So under the heading of, well, that didn't take long, we have last week's Microsoft mess, which Kevin Beaumont named Follina, as we know, after the area code of Follina, Italy, which appeared in one of the exploit documents. And recall that this is the MS-MSDT:// vulnerability that was being abused through Office, all versions of Office, and by using an RTF extension on the file, you are bypassing the protected viewing mode. So it's now under widespread and quite aggressive attempts of abuse. A most likely Chinese state-aligned threat actor has been observed attempting to exploit this Follina vulnerability, targeting government entities in Europe and in the U.S. The enterprise security firm Proofpoint, I think they're Israeli-based, said it blocked attempts at exploiting this remote code execution flaw being tracked as, CVE 2022-3190 with a CVSS of 7.8, no fewer than 1,000 phishing messages containing a lure document which were sent to targets. Proofpoint said this campaign masqueraded as a salary increase and utilized an RTF with the exploit payload downloaded from the IP 45.76.53.253. The attack payload is a base 64 encoded PowerShell script, which functions as a downloader to retrieve a second PowerShell script from a remote server named seller-notification.live. The second expanded script checks for the presence of virtualization, because, that's one of the ways that these scripts are analyzed is they're stuck in a VM in order not to get, in order to create containment. So now increasingly scripts and malware are checking to see whether they're being run under virtualization, in which case they don't do anything bad. So it checks for virtualization, steals information from local browsers, and in the write-up of this, there was a list of
all of the passwords that this thing attempts to exfiltrate from every browser that we know about, and also mail clients and file services. It conducts local machine reconnaissance and then zips it all for exfiltration back to IP address 45.77.156.179. The phishing campaign has not been linked to a previously known group, but Proofpoint said that given the specificity of the targeting and the PowerShell's payloads, it has wide-ranging reconnaissance capabilities. They didn't think it was an amateur. They believed it to be mounted by a nation-state level actor. The vulnerability, as we know from Microsoft, remains unpatched, with Microsoft urging customers, who ask, they're not being proactive, to disable the protocol to prevent the attack vector. And in the absence of a security update, the great guys over at ZeroPatch, numeral 0, patch.com, have released one of their unofficial micro patches to block the ongoing attacks against Windows systems. Let's see. We're the first Tuesday of the week, so next Tuesday, the 14th, hopefully we're going to see that this thing gets updated and fixed. ZeroPatch's founder, Mitya Kolsek, said, "It doesn't matter which version of Office you have installed, or if you have Office installed at all. The vulnerability could also be exploited through other attack vectors." Proofpoint said that the extensive reconnaissance conducted by the second PowerShell script demonstrates an actor interested in a large variety of software on a target's computer. So this, coupled with the tight targeting of European and local U.S. governments, led them to suspect a campaign that has a state-aligned source. And as we sign off from this follow-up, let's all remember that, as I noted last week, when this nightmare began, it was the middle of April, about a month and a half ago, when this was responsibly reported by a credible security research group as being, at the time, mid-April, under active exploitation. The report was made to Microsoft's Security Response Center. The group providing the report provided a copy of the in-the-wild, real-world Microsoft Office document, which demonstrated the nature of the exploit. But because the exploit didn't immediately reproduce itself and fall at the feet of the Microsoft MSRC guy, he just blew it off, saying it wasn't a security problem. Well, it certainly is now. And a different Windows URL schema can be abused. Leo, I'm going to take a sip of water.
Okay.
Let's tell our listeners how we're here listening to this.
Okay. Our show today brought to you by our great sponsor, Jumpcloud. I got to tell you a little bit about Jumpcloud. It's an interesting company with an interesting idea. And, of course, it's a security company. Because you're listening to this show, they figure, well, you're probably interested in cybersecurity. It's obviously a top-of-mind issue for any organization. In fact, many of them are spending the lion's share of their IT budget to buy more complicated cybersecurity tools, to hire expensive, hard-to-find staff to integrate and run those tools. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can have good security without more complicated security. In fact, it might be the case that the more complicated it is, the less secure it is. Here's a solution. The right solution to solve your specific needs will not overburden your overworked IT and security staff, but it can keep you safe. It's called Jumpcloud. Jumpcloud is recognized by G2 as a leader in 5 categories. It's a top 5 security vendor. There are 1,000+ positive reviews on G2. More than 150,000 companies use G2 today. Well, maybe I better explain what Jumpcloud is before I go much farther. It really is a smart choice for somebody who wants to simplify security and give yourself complete protection. Number one, and we talk about it all the time, You can reduce 98% of issues that lead to cyber incidents by just a few simple things. Multi-factor authentication, right? Applying least privilege access, that old zero trust thing we talk about. Keeping your systems patched, and then protecting your data and using anti-malware. Those are 5 things. You do those right, 98% of the issues go away. You can reduce IT sprawl with Jumpcloud, reducing administrative overhead, reducing complexity. You can do more with the resources you have. Complexity just leads to user fatigue, misconfigurations, brittle systems. Simplicity is a great thing in security if you can do it and do it right. Jumpcloud includes zero trust. Granting secure access is, can be a very complicated thing, lots of rules and so forth. Not with Jumpcloud. Jumpcloud makes it seamless for you to provision and grant access just to those things an employee needs, and it all comes from a single integrated platform, especially these days with hybrid work, people in the office, people at home. It's kind of a nutty situation, but Jumpcloud was designed for this. Jumpcloud makes it easy for administrators to securely manage users, devices, and access, and not just in the office, but wherever they are. You've got one platform that protects you everywhere. I want you to fully evaluate Jumpcloud, and you can do it for free right now at cloud.jumpcloud.com/security now. Help your organization move to a streamlined, modern, secure, hybrid work model with Jumpcloud. cloud.jumpcloud.com/security now. Before you go out and buy a dozen new tools to solve all these problems, get the most important stuff done right with one tool that does it all, Jumpcloud. Jumpcloud, it's cloud.jumpcloud.com/security. Now, we thank them so much for their support of Security Now and the efforts Steve is making to secure us all. Now, back to Mr. G.
So, last week I opened our coverage of the latest Microsoft mess by stating that we have a new head buried in the sand, quite pervasive Microsoft Office zero-day remote code execution vulnerability, which is now being used in attacks. And of course, I was referring to the issue we were just talking about, which is now, since then, exploded in the wild. And of course, the head buried in the sand I was referring to was Microsoft's decision to ignore the early warning that they were given a month beforehand. And last week, I also observed that this MSDT:// protocol scheme wasn't a bug. It was a feature. And that this would make its remediation all the more difficult because it could not simply be turned off globally, since there might well be some users who were dependent upon that feature because, again, it's not a bug. Unfortunately, it's a feature which has now been revealed to be insecure. And it's not alone. We're back here today because, sure enough, another similar feature of Windows has just surfaced. This time, it uses a different scheme. This one is search-ms:// protocol. Bleeping Computer reported that a security researcher by the name of Matthew Hickey, a co-founder of Hacker House, found a way to combine a newly discovered Microsoft Office Olay object flaw, because, yes, as we've commented, Leo, Olay is still with us. You can combine this Olay object flaw with the search-ms: protocol handler to open a Windows search window from a Word document. And by search window, we mean that a Windows Explorer search results window will open, showing a list of files to run. But that list of search results, that search result files, can be sourced from a hacker-controlled remote server anywhere. Whoopsie. The result can be an extremely convincing "your software must be upgraded to proceed" style attack. It's convincing because the dialog runs from Windows, I mean, it is a Windows dialog. And so it's not going to be, like in the browser or stuck within some borders anywhere. It is coming from Windows. And although it's triggered by an untrusted Word document, which the user can have received through any channel, such as spoofing mail, it also can be zero-click. Bad guys can use this hack by sending phishing emails claiming to be security updates or patches that need to be installed. The Object Olay flaw that Matthew Hickey found bypasses what would normally be a confirmation dialog, which would pop up, which Word would show if you were trying to use the search-ms://protocol scheme. Now that gets suppressed, making these very convincing looking, and, fasten your seatbelt. This might not trick, and probably would not trick, listeners of this podcast. But we've made our computers so complex that most users have, no idea what's going on. And legitimate software does open pop-ups telling us that we need to upgrade this or that so often that it's become commonplace. Microsoft, as I mentioned, did incorporate a warning confirmation dialog in an attempt to prevent the abuse of this confusion, but this most recent hack arranges to bypass those warnings. And it seems to me that, again, there are a whole bunch of protocol handlers in Word that can be abused. This creeping featureitis is insidious, and it appears to be unavoidable as products mature. In the case of Windows, what has now become an incredibly complex system has been created that no one fully understands. And I mean that seriously. The Office group are the size of a company themselves, and they're producing stuff, having some interaction over on the Windows side because they need this or that feature added, and you're just going to get mistakes in this process. Security, as we know, is unforgiving, and only one mistake is all that's required for a bad guy to get in. In this particular instance of over-engineered complexity, there are many similar protocol handlers which can be triggered by Microsoft Word documents, often without requiring any user interaction. And once again, Microsoft apparently just doesn't get it, or at least they don't want to. When Bleeping Computer asked Microsoft how they planned to resolve this most recent foible, Microsoft replied, quote, "This social engineering technique requires a user to run a malicious document and interact with a list of executables from an attacker-specified network share. We recommend users practice safe computing habits and to only open files that come from trusted sources." But the whole point is that the abuse of these protocol handlers allows for the creation of zero-click exploits against users who merely open documents, or for the creation of extremely convincing spoofs which hide what's really going on. So when Microsoft says, we recommend users practice safe computing habits, well, the users think they are. I mean, they don't want to do anything bad on purpose, but it happens anyway. Grumble. Okay. What is billed as a critical UNISOC, UNISOC, I'm sure SOC is system on a chip, vulnerability affecting millions of Android smartphones probably isn't anything to worry about. If you were worried by headlines that you saw like that, I don't think there's anything to be too concerned about. Check Point went to the trouble of reverse engineering the firmware of a widely used cellular modem chipset, and they uncovered a buffer overflow which could be exploited to hang the chip. But there's no suggestion that attacker-provided code could be injected. And even if it could be, it's unlikely that much damage could be done, since the chipset in question here is only running on a tiny subsystem of the entire device. It's the cellular modem. And while in theory there could be some damage done, in this case, it just creates a denial of service, meaning that the service crashes. But the headlines were followed by breathless statements such as, "A critical security flaw has been uncovered in UNISOC's smartphone chipset that could be potentially weaponized to disrupt a smartphone's radio communications through a malformed packet." Well, yeah, that's true. The company in question, UNISOC, is based in Shanghai and is the world's fourth largest mobile processor manufacturer, following MediaTek, Qualcomm, and Apple. So, they're significant. They currently account for around 11% of all system-on-a-chip components. The problem has been patched after having received a somewhat surprisingly high CVSS of 9.4. So that seems high to me for a denial of service on a cellular radio, but I suppose the fact that an adversary could simply send a malformed packet to crash a handset's radio seemed like a big worry, to whomever assigned this CVS. In any event, Google will be pushing an update in their June 2022 release for Android, and I do congratulate Check Point for their reverse engineering work. As I've noted before, it seems wrong to me that widely used proprietary products need to be reverse engineered to have their security verified by third party. But that's the closed source world we live in today, and increasingly it seems clear that having the source in the open, the source for very important, significant components of the ecosystem, should be a requirement, really, of somebody agreeing to license it and put it in in a large number of devices. So, ransomware sanctions are causing trouble for the ransomware cretins. Yay. In an interesting bit of ransomware news, sanctions are turning out to have quite an impact on the ransomware business. The problem is that even though the attackers are not law-abiding, they're, as we know, anything but, their victims are. So enterprises which have been hit by a ransomware and are now being held at ransom are legally prohibited from making any ransom payments through any mechanism, even if they wanted to. Mandiant's research paper published last Thursday was titled "To Hades and Back, UNC 2165 Shifts to Lockbit to Evade Sanctions." And that headline requires a bit of explanation, which Mandiant then provides. They explained the U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, sanctioned the entity known as Evil Corp back in December of 2019, citing the group's extensive development and use and control of the Drydex malware ecosystem. Since the sanctions were announced, Evil Corp affiliated actors appear to have continuously changed the ransomware they use. And I have a chart from the Mandiant report showing a block of time when they were using BitPaymer, then they shifted to Doppelpaymer, and then for a while they were using Wasted Locker, then they used Hades for a while, then Hades Phone Nix Locker, and then finally Hades Payload Bin. So again, continually making these changes over time. They said specifically, following an October 2020 OFAC advisory, there was a cessation of wasted locker activity and the emergence of multiple closely related ransomware variants in relatively quick succession. In other words, the names were changing, but not much else was changing. These developments, they wrote, suggested that the actors faced challenges in receiving ransom payments following their ransomware's public association with Evil Corp. Mandiant, they wrote, has investigated multiple Lockbit ransomware intrusions attributed to UNC 2165, a financially motivated threat cluster that shares numerous overlaps with the threat group publicly reported as Evil Corp. UNC 2165 has been active since at least 2019, and noticed when that occurred. So, yep, somebody new popped up, perhaps changing their name, and almost exclusively obtains access to victim networks via the fake updates infection chain, tracked by Mandiant as UNC 1543. Previously, they said, we've observed UNC 2165 deploy Hades ransomware. Based on the overlaps between UNC 2165 and Evil Corp, we assess with high confidence that these actors have shifted away from using exclusive ransomware variants to Lockbit, a well-known ransomware as a service in their operations, likely to hinder attribution efforts in order to evade sanctions. So Mandiant's paper then delves into all the details of the intelligence that they collected to track these activities and to draw these conclusions. But I mostly wanted to make the observation, which I thought was interesting, that just as the Conti gang apparently shut down and disbanded due to the trouble they caused for themselves by siding so clearly with Russia, and then falling under the Russian sanction umbrella, thus being unable to receive ransom payments from the West. Similarly, U.S. Treasury Department sanctions on many other ransomware operators prevent them, too, from receiving payment from U.S. resident victims, so the prior practice of building up a big public reputation no longer serves the financial interests of these ransomware gangs. The next thing I want to talk about is what this is in the middle of, which or picks up on, which is the fact that ransomware groups have now been spotted successfully compromising motherboard firmware. One of the consequences of Conti's boasting about how they side with Russia, as we talked about a couple times, is that somebody within the Conti membership who had good access to what was going on leaked a bunch of the internal chats from that was always meant to stay private. So the following leaked message, posted exactly 1 year ago on June 7th, coincidentally, 2021, it reads, and this is good English, considering that it was probably a native Russian speaker, from someone named Stern. He wrote, "Hi, things are good. I apologize for not immediately responding. I haven't communicated through a toad," that's what it says. Maybe that's, I don't know, a typo or something. "Haven't communicated through a toad for a long time." And Leo, for what it's worth, I doubt that you or I have ever communicated through a toad. I'm just saying.
It probably means something in the hacker world. I don't know. Yeah.
So Stern said, "I haven't seen what you wrote. Now I'm finishing a full report on the mechanism of operation of the Intel ME, Intel Management Engine controller, and the AMT technology based on it. Recovered a bunch of undocumented commands using reverse, meaning reverse engineering, interface dump, and fuzzing. Unfortunately, The starting theory based on the presentation of embedded/positive technologies reporters was not confirmed in the form in which they presented it. But, okay, so that was probably referring to, back at the time, a report of vulnerabilities in the Intel management engine. So this guy jumped on those, rubbing his hands together, thinking, oh, cool, I'm going to go pursue this. So he's saying, unfortunately, the starting theory based on the presentation of embedded/positive technologies reporters was not confirmed in the form in which they presented it, meaning, it wasn't what they said, but he stayed with it. He said, but there is another legal mechanism to activate AMT, but so far it has not reached the working software. At the moment, I make a sniffer buffer that provides the HECI interface because it is all configured in UEFI. Then the sniffer took a little longer. After I fully restore the command set, the POC will be prepared. There are ideas. If we talk about the topic of UEFI, then this is not just a load dropper, but also perhaps some daemon of the level of SMM processors, system management mode processors. He said, plus, since now I have tightly studied the management engine controller, the idea is to test such functionality as rewriting the SPI flash drive through it. Usually, this controller is allowed to write to the flash drive, which cannot be said about the processor. And some commands were found that are responsible for this functionality. So bottom line is, in this posting, which was leaked from Conti, and this was made, the original posting was from a year ago, this guy is saying, I have achieved what I needed to as a consequence of this reverse engineering of the Intel management engine firmware on the motherboard of pretty much everything. So the conversations among the Conti members have shed light on the syndicate's attempts to search for vulnerabilities related to the management engine firmware and BIOS write protection. They reverse engineered the system to locate undocumented commands and vulnerabilities in the management engine interface, achieved code execution in the management engine to access and rewrite the SPI flash memory, and dropped system management mode level implants which could be leveraged to modify the OS kernel, that is, the operating system running that is booted on this motherboard. The leaked chats show that the work ultimately resulted in proof of concept code last summer that can obtain system management mode code execution by gaining control over the management engine after obtaining initial access to the host through traditional vectors like phishing, malware, or supply chain compromise. Basically, we're always talking about how you get in to a machine, and then often you need to elevate your privilege. And what you're probably doing is looking to see where you are and then moving laterally. Now, this group, some members somewhere, have developed the technology to go down rather than out and across. That is, they are now able to infiltrate the firmware of motherboards. Security researchers who have been privy to these chat logs have observed that, quote, the shift to management engine firmware gives attackers a far larger pool of potential victims to attack and a new avenue to reaching the most privileged code and execution modes available on modern systems. And of course, as we know, and as I mentioned in my notes that I deleted or somehow didn't make it into the show notes, it's enough trouble getting people to update their operating systems and their application software. The bad guys know that there is a serious update log, or lag rather, in getting that to happen. So imagine how many more systems firmware is never touched. And to that, add the fact that I'm sure many of us here listening to this podcast, because we tend to have propellers spinning on our heads, have done firmware updates. I've encountered, and I'm sure everybody has encountered, warnings saying, basically, leave the firmware that you have alone, unless something that, like, there's some hardware problem that you're coming here to update your firmware for. That is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so this notion in firmware land is still sort of pre-viral. It's the only reason to update firmware would be to fix some hardware level compatibility problem, not because there might be something evil crawling around in there that you want to update. So as a consequence, I mean, I'm sure the majority of systems that are out and running are using firmware that has never been updated since the system was first installed, despite the fact that this podcast has covered multiple firmware problems. And it was one of those, apparently, a year ago that got a member of the Conti group, or at least somebody posting in the Conti secure chat channel, that, hey, I figured this out. We now, if we can run code in the user's OS, we can now infiltrate their UEFI BIOS and get persistence and complete invisibility from traditional anti-malware. Yeah, Leo, it really is.
If you have, I mean, don't most PCs now have in the firmware a signing certificate for the firmware? I know they do for the boot, right? The secure boot, right?
Right.
Is the firmware not checked?
There's no way for it to check itself.
Oh, of course.
Because the root is the ultimate authority,
right?
And so there's no third party to say, yeah,
authority.
You're fine,
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Boy, that seems like something you might want to put in BIOS or something somewhere.
Well, what you really want is to rigorously write protect this. And
right.
In the old days, you had motherboards with jumpers, and some server motherboards will still have a physical write protect jumper that will just disable the ability for the firmware to be modified.
Well, that protects BIOS, but it doesn't protect UEFI because that's on the hard drive, right?
Well, no,
and you write to that all the time, I think. Yes.
Well, the UEFI is on the motherboard. There is some information stored on the hard drive, but of course you're able to put new hard drives in, and the UEFI survives. So the UEFI is actually in NVRAM.
All I know is from installing Linux and stuff. If you put a new hard drive in, it wouldn't boot because you don't have an operating system on it.
Right.
If you install a UEFI aware operating system, it is going to write some stuff on the
right.
drive.
But so that's like the boot sector on the partition. But UEFI is that stuff that you get to by hitting F2
It's
or
confusing
del.
because some of it's in firmware, but some of it's in software, isn't it? So what's in software is what the UEFI BIOS jumps to and executes. Right. But if you deleted your UEFI partition on a hard drive, you wouldn't boot.
Right.
So there is firmware UEFI, but there's also software UEFI. And are they talking about something that modifies firmware?
Yes. That's where the Intel management engine and system management mode and all of that is.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, so they're talking about going down and physically modifying the firmware on the motherboard, so it doesn't matter if you reformat your drive or if you install a new operating system or you do anything.
Wow.
Yeah, and I imagine before long, since the UEFI firmware It has known bugs. We've talked about them on the podcast. It's got known bugs in the motherboard firmware, and though that is not being updated, and as I said, it's hard enough to get operating systems updated and applications.
I get BIOS updates all the time, though, right? I mean, don't I? I mean...
Well, and that's the problem, is that the fact that you get BIOS updates means that the BIOS is not protected against being modified.
Right, it can be modified
by software.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yep.
And once something bad gets in there, because the BIOS is updating itself, it can disable the self update so that the BIOS will no longer accept an update after it becomes malicious. Wow. I mean, it's really bad.
Wow.
And and this is the situation we've created for ourselves.
Yep.
I had a fun piece of errata to share from Enosalot. I think that's how I pronounce his name. He said, at GRC, security now errata. Grover the Muppet was blue.
Okay.
Not green.
Don't mess with that.
He said, he's not green. You're probably thinking of Oscar the Grouch. And he said, just trying to save you from the Muppet Mafia, who will not tolerate inaccuracies. And I hope I don't disappoint you if I have no idea what color any of them are. I know the Cookie Monster was blue, because I had a Cookie Monster with big goo-goo eyes. It was the early GRC mascot.
Oh, but, how funny.
As for Grover and
no idea,
Grouch,
no idea,
or Oscar
the Grouch, yeah, lives in a garbage can, yeah.
Oh, and several ServiceNSW digital driver's license owners. That is, we've got listeners, not surprisingly, who have these DDLs, right? And they assured me they have not tampered with them, so that's good.
Good boys. Yes,
they did note that a simple screen capture would fool no one, because the screen incorporates a number of animated effects, which, that's where all the time got spent, right?
Right.
In doing animation instead of the crypto. There's a flower that animates in the upper left-hand corner, and the phone's inertial positioning is used to animate a large multicolored flower in the background wallpaper. So you look at it and then you turn it back and forth, and you
can't fake that. Whoa!
Oh no, Leo, that's high tech.
Yeah.
So if only its developers has given as much thought to the security of the device as they gave to its, flash.
It's better than plastic.
That's right. And Larry Wilson tweeted, as closing the loop, he said, I think you've undersold the benefit of triply encrypting and going from 256 bits to 768 bits, because those are logarithms, and adding represents multiplying. The growth in security is immense. Compare the difference between 64-bit keys and 128-bit keys. And okay, so Larry was referring to Bryant McDermott's question I replied to last week about whether triply encrypting with 256-bit keys each time would be equivalent to taking the sum or the product of those bits. Now, I answered correctly, but in rereading Bryant's question, I could see what Larry meant. Bryant asked, hey, Steve, quick question. If I encrypt a file with a 256-bit encryption 3 times with 3 different passwords, what is the resulting bit strength? Is it 256 plus 256 plus 256, or 256 times 256 times 256? I answered Bryant's question correctly in that the resulting bit strength is the sum of the individual separate encryption key lengths. But as we know, each single additional bit of key strength that we add doubles the number of all possible keys, since you have all of the original number of keys when that new bit is off, and all of the original number of keys again when that new bit is on. So obviously, each bit you add doubles the total number. So encrypting 3 times with 256 bits each time would result in 2 to the 768 possible keys, which is a ridiculously large number, which I, for the heck of it, put in the show notes just because it's kind of glorious. I mean, I didn't even count the groupings by 3 or the digits. It is a huge number.
There is an Emacs command that will turn that into, whatever it is, 180 gazillion. I will do that for you.
Like it'll speak it for you.
It doesn't speak it. It actually spells it out in English.
Oh, my Lord. And has man ever run out of names for those groups of 3?
Oh, God, yeah, right? I mean, isn't that why Google, there's a Google? Because that's a 1 with 100 zeros.
Yeah, this has more than that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at some point, someone must have given up naming these divisions.
It's based on a kind of Latin base, so you could probably deduce it.
Oh. Great. Please, nobody tweet me the answer. Actually, it wouldn't fit in a tweet, so we're safe. And Leo, let's take our last break, and we're going to talk about passkeys.
I am going to use the calculator soup word to number converter.
Good.
Since I don't have Emacs on this machine, convert this number. Let's see if it can do it. It broke it.
Yeah. I mean, it's big.
It never came up with an answer. That's ridiculous.
1-552-518-092.
No. No need. That's funny. This is too big. All right. Oh, it has to be less than 200 characters. So yeah, it's too big. I bet Emacs will do it. It's a big num, but we'll handle it. I will check into it. Our show today brought to you by Bitwarden. Nobody should have to remember all your passwords, and even more importantly, nobody should reuse passwords. Bitwarden's the only open source, cross-platform, Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, Android, everywhere, that can be used both at home and at work. Yes, they have a business version. On the go, works on all phones, and is trusted by millions. That should be enough. We could just stop the ad right now. Well, I'll give you a little more. With Bitwarden, you can securely store credentials across personal and business worlds. Actually, which is really cool. If you do the business plan, every person in the office has a personal vault. In fact, that's how you start. You set your personal vault up. Because Bitwarden's open source, it's always free to have a personal vault, free forever. They're not going to come to you and say, oh, never mind, you don't get a free one anymore. So you set up that personal vault, and then you join the business organization. Now you've got a vault for all your passwords and a separate vault for the business passwords. That's great. And you know what? Bitwarden just does something great. We mentioned this before, but I want to mention it again. They call it Username Generator. They're integrating with 3 popular email forwarding services that also happen to be open source: Simple Login, Anon-Addy, and Firefox Relay. Now, let me show you what happens here. I am going to open my Bitwarden. I'll zoom in a little bit. I'll open the generator, zoom in. Now, of course, I can generate a password, and we love all of these. I always like to put a little punctuation in there. Let's make it really long, 128 characters. Now, that's a password, right? Completely random. Generate another one, put on your clipboard, no problem. But look at this. This is new. Username. So I can have a plus addressed email, so I can say who I want to do this with. I can make it Gmail or whoever else I want to be. I can use a catch-all email with my domain's configured catch-all inbox, so I can specify that. Or I can have a random word, thrower 6340. And then, as you correctly point out, this could be this could go to Firefox Relay. This could go to Anon-Addy or Addy and Simple Login. So it's going to create a username and an email address that's unique for this website. Why would you want to do that? Well, a lot of reasons. First of all, now you have a second thing you know. You're not using your well-known email address. You're using a unique email address in addition to your password. If hackers are doing credential stuffing, that stops them cold because they're going around looking for other logins with the same address they already know. Well, you never use that address again. It's also great because if somebody sells your email, if you sign up for something and they sell your email to a marketer, you know immediately who did it. This is such a great idea, and it's part of Bitwarden, and it's free forever for life. Adding another layer of security and privacy to your account. You can have an API key for your individual account with a chosen service, so you can have any service you want. You can select the desired options, and once generated, a new alias instantly registered to your account. So you use the API key, you go to say, let's say Firefox Relay, that's your new email address. Using unique usernames, email addresses, and passwords for every account, it's awesome. Obviously, you got to use two-factor. Bitwarden supports that. Strongly encourage that. In fact, I use my YubiKey with Bitwarden. So even if somebody were to somehow magically guess my super long master password on Bitwarden, I still don't have to worry because right here I have my YubiKey and nobody can turn on Bitwarden on any machine unless they've got this baby. So that's a very handy feature. Another reason you'll love Bitwarden. Not required. You can use an authenticator. I think you probably cannot use two-factor, but why would you do that? Why would you do that? I just think, look, this is the thing about Bitwarden. Because it's open source, they're thinking about every possible angle. As long as we need passwords, we need Bitwarden. Bitwarden's a must-need for your business, too. Fully customizable, adapts to your business needs. They have a great feature called Bitwarden Send. It's a fully encrypted method to send sensitive information, text or files. The other end does not need a Bitwarden account. You can generate, obviously, unique secure passwords for every site. Bitwarden is GDPR, CCPA, the California Privacy Act, HIPAA, SOC 2 compliant because it's an end-to-end encrypted vault. By the way, helps mitigate phishing attacks because your fill-in, I have that little plug-in on my Firefox. You can have it on Chrome as well as I think every browser. I have that little fill-in. It's not going to fill in on a phish site. It's only going to fill in on the real site. Teams organization plan, $3 a month per user. It lets you share private data securely with coworkers across departments, the entire company. The Bitwarden Enterprise Organization Plan, just $5 a month per user. Individuals, basic free accounts, yours forever. Unlimited number of passwords. You can upgrade anytime to a premium account for less than $1 a month. Family Organization Plan, $3.33 a month for up to 6 family members. All the premium features. Look, until some magic day in the future, when you don't need passwords, you need Bitwarden, the only open-source cross-platform password manager that could be used at home, on the go, at work. It's trusted by millions of individuals, teams, and organizations worldwide. Free trial if you want to do the Teams or Enterprise plan, or get started for free. As I said, always free, forever, across all devices as an individual user. But please do me a favor, go to bitwarden.com/twit so they know you saw it on Security Now, because we want to keep these guys advertising with us because we believe in it. It's so important. I want everybody to know about it. Bitwarden.com/twit. You can use a plus address if you want to use Gmail or whatever. Just so clever. Such a good idea. All right. Now, Steve has been thinking about passkeys. So is this going to eliminate passwords forever?
I originally had these thoughts filed under miscellany because I didn't want to make a big deal about it. But the more I thought about them, the more they grew. And as I said, no other news of the week rose to any greater significance. So I decided to sort of more formally take a second look at passkeys in the wake of yesterday's Apple WWDC presentation. So a bit of an @SGGRC tweet storm arose from our listeners yesterday following the keynote.
Yes, because Apple announced it. Yeah.
Yeah, because where Apple made a point of highlighting their forthcoming adoption of essentially the revised and much more practical FIDO2 public key authentication system under the unofficial designation, which has taken hold of passkeys. And as we know, that was the title of our podcast on May 10th, 4 weeks ago. And so I wanted to thank and acknowledge all of those who took the time to tweet. What I think set most people off was that this was the first time outside of Squirrel that we've seen the very Squirrel-like use of a QR code to allow logging onto someone else's machine using an identity stored in the user's smartphone. We haven't seen that from Google yet, but if Apple does it, then Android will have to follow. So I imagine it's just a matter of time. One thing I did not highlight when I first talked about this 4 weeks ago was the uncomfortable, unanswered questions surrounding manufacturer lock-in. Apple seems quite uninterested in allowing me to send and receive iMessages from my Windows desktop. Being an avid iPhone and iPad user, this imposes a constant and very real inconvenience for me. If I was using a Mac, no problem. From a Mac, I have access to my iMessages, but not from Windows. And I've sort of come up with a workaround using iCloud for Windows in order to send things over into the Apple world and then, stick them in a posting or an iMessage. But, it's more work than it should be. So I worry that Apple's use of this Passkeys technology will be similarly and characteristically an Apple-only solution, synchronizing only among Apple's authentication devices and not to Windows and Android. And that's a huge practical problem for Passkeys adoption, which Squirrel never had. So I want to make sure that everyone understands what the difference is, because there is a takeaway from this, and why we're almost certainly heading for trouble, which, among all the celebration, no one seems to have talked about this yet. Okay, so why is that important? Both systems, Fido and Squirrel, share the common property that the authenticating client, a smartphone, a fob, or a PC, creates a public key pair for a website. The process of registering the user's identity to that website just involves providing the remote website with only the public key of the pair. And that's the essence of both approaches. That's Fido and Squirrel. Subsequently, verifying any user's identity amounts to verifying that the user is holding the matching private key. So to perform that verification, the website sends a random, unique nonce, it's a challenge, to the user's authenticator, which signs it using its private key, which it never lets go of. The signed blob is returned to the site, which verifies the signature using the public key that it originally received from the client during its registration.
This is not very different from public key crypto in general, how you would verify a signed email, for instance, when I send you an email.
Yes, that's all it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. Everybody has your public key, and you sign your email using your private key, and they're able to verify the signature on the email, which proves that it came from you, or at least someone holding the private key.
And because Apple has widespread biometric identification, they have a really good way of verifying you're you. I don't know if you caught this. I thought this was very Squirrel-like. They said, well, what if you go to what if you log into a site at a library, a computer you don't own, and did you catch this? They showed a QR code.
Well, that is Squirrel-like.
Yeah.
In fact, that's what Squirrel allows, and it was part of my original demos of Squirrel, and that's why so many people sent tweets, is they said, hey, Apple's using QR codes with Passkeys. And it's like, well, good, because that's a use case which is important. I mean, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not imagining that Squirrel is going to get adopted. Or not, at least not yet. We're going FIDO2, but there are a couple differences which are significant. Okay, so we have the private key. Websites have the public key. They send us something that they've never sent before, which we sign, they verify the signature, thus they know we have the private key, exactly as you said, Leo, like email. Where the two systems, FIDO and Squirrel, that is to say Passkeys and Squirrel, crucially and importantly differ is how those original key pairs are created. The FIDO2 Passkeys system creates key pairs randomly, whereas Squirrel calculates them deterministically. Okay, so remember that Squirrel's primary design feature, the core concept behind Squirrel from the start, was the idea of using a single grand master key and hashing each website's logon domain to automatically create per domain public key pairs. That simple innovation eliminates all need for dynamic synchronization of randomly generated passkeys among devices, because each separated device will derive the same per-site private key from one grandmaster key that they share. So you load that one master key into each of your various authenticating devices under Squirrel, and that master key generates all of the per domain subsidiary key pairs forever. Okay, but Squirrel is not the system we're going to get. And that almost might be deliberate, since the system it appears we're going to get really will create lock-in. I've read the glowing celebratory announcements about how Apple, Google, and Microsoft are going to be implementing passkeys. But the tech press really needs to start asking, what about cross-platform passkey sharing and interoperability? You know, awkward though a username and password are, the one thing they have going for them is that they are platform agnostic. Okay, in the near future, when you use an iPhone, an iPad, or a Mac to register your identity as a passkey on a website, that iPhone, iPad, or Mac creates a random public key pair, and the private key is held close and never released, which of course is important because releasing it would defeat the system's security. Apple will back it up securely to iCloud, and I'm sure they will freely synchronize all of a user's passkeys among the devices Apple controls and that are the users. But is Apple going to dynamically synchronize those private keys among Android and Windows authentication devices? When pigs fly, if they keep their keys to themselves, and if Google and Microsoft each keep the private keys that they create to themselves, then we have a fragmentation disaster on our hands. You register a passkey on a Windows device, but none of your Apple devices will know that secret private key. So you can only log on with the device family which originally registered at that website. Well, that's a mess. In today's highly heterogeneous computing environment, the single most compelling benefit of password managers is that they are cross-platform. Would anyone be comfortable using a password manager that was not? Now, I suppose if you are 100% all in on Apple, which of course is what they want, then an Apple-only solution would be okay. But it's not clear how you could ever change your mind. I'm all in on iPhone and iPad, but the things I need to do can only be accomplished with Windows and, I dare say, DOS. So as nice as Apple's Passkeys system may be, and as much as I'm a devoted iPhone and iPad user, I can't use Apple's Passkeys system until I'm sure there will be a means for also using its passkey registrations which I created on my iPhone or an iPad under Windows. Because
would it be sufficient?
We should be able to.
Yeah. Would it be sufficient to say, here's your private key? In other words, if I could take my private key, it's on my iPhone, obviously, and just send it to my Android phone and register it with passkeys on my Android phone, isn't that all I need is that private key?
Yes. And for example, Squirrel does that because that's the solution.
You have to be portable. So it wouldn't be a hard thing for Apple to make it visible somehow, right?
All they have to do is put it up on a QR code.
What they're going to say is, oh, no, because people don't understand the difference between public and private keys. In fact, we know that because that's how NFTs keep getting stolen.
Exactly.
And so they're going to give out their private key inadvertently. And then, of course, the jig is up.
Apple is going to hold this close. They're going to synchronize their devices, and they are never going to allow those keys to get exported.
Do you have but one private key? You'd have a private key per person, right?
Per site. No, that's the difference.
Oh, so it is a large amount of data then.
Yes.
You don't.
Yes.
Oh, so why don't they just? Is that what Squirrel does? I have my key that ultimately
Squirrel was one key.
Yeah, that's what we should do.
I know.
In the long run, it could be tattooed on your inner thigh or something, but everybody should have that one private key. That's what I do with PGP.
You wouldn't want it tattooed. That is the Squirrel gift.
One key.
One key, and it allowed you to have anonymous log, secure, unhackable, anonymous log on everywhere.
Because I'm me. Only I have access to that. So
that's right. That's not what Fido did. Fido generates them at random.
Oh, that's
and
a mistake.
I know. It's bad.
That's a mistake because now you have this is just another password system.
That's all it is.
Because now you have a password, which is
is different because the thing that's different is that the dynamic authentication that the website sends you a challenge which you sign and return. So what that means is all they have is your public key.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it escapes from them. That's the only thing we've achieved with Fido is that websites can now. Remember how many times I said Squirrel gives websites no secrets to keep.
Right.
That's
it eliminates breach problems. But this still is a terrible.
It is.
Why would
awful.
They solve it that way? It seems so obvious that everybody should have. And then you solve it by if I have multiple accounts, for instance, for tax preparation software, I have multiple accounts because I do my mother's thing, right? My mother's taxes. So I could generate a private key for her that I would keep and a private key for me that I would keep. And I would have then multiple logins to a single site.
Yep.
But
you're describing Squirrel.
Yes.
You're describing Squirrel.
One key per person. I don't understand why that's not obvious.
That's the right solution, and that's not what we got.
I didn't realize that I should have listened more carefully when you were describing this. I didn't realize Passkeys generated a unique private key for every site and app. That's
and
really,
think about it. They have to, otherwise they'd be giving every site the same public key.
Right.
And that can't happen. Because then you would have no security.
Yeah. So how do you solve that with Fido?
Well, the only way to do it is cloud sync. You need cloud synchronization. And so my takeaway from this whole thing is until Apple, Google, and Microsoft figure out like
interoperability.
Do not do this.
Yeah.
Wait for a password manager to support this.
Right.
Because what we need is the same cross-platform capability that we have
Yes.
now with passwords. We need
Portability.
that with
You need
we need
portability.
portability.
Yeah.
Yes.
And by the way, don't blame Apple. This is the FIDO2 spec.
Right. I'm not blaming Apple.
No. Some people in the
Except
chat room are. This is not Apple saying, the one thing you could blame Apple is if they decided not to make it portable. Because they could make it portable, right?
We could also blame Apple for not adopting Squirrel.
Well,
which
obviously,
solves this
they should have
problem.
done that. Wow. So I wonder, though, if you're going to use the Passkeys name, which presumably Fido trademarked.
No, it's not official. It's not an
not
actual
official?
name.
Oh, it's just-
no. There's nothing called Passkeys in Fido.
Okay.
The marketing people said, instead of passwords, it's Passkeys.
But there's no
There's
requirement.
no proprietary ownership.
There's
of
nothing
that
you could
term.
say that, if you want. See, they could have trademarked it and then said, well, if you want to use the word Passkeys trademark, you've got to have portability. They didn't do it.
Well, remember, Fido began with a dongle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was never meant to be like mass the way
Right.
it has become. And,
Right.
and it's because they backed away from that and said, okay, well, we're not happy about it, but we'll let you use your phone. We don't think it's as good as a token, but we tried to do tokens and no one bought them.
Nobody's going to buy tokens. We all have phones with strong. I mean, here's the good news: we all have phones with strong biometrics and secure enclaves, so they're pretty good. In fact, I would argue if you just have a YubiKey without biometrics, they make them with biometrics. But if you have one without biometrics, this isn't tied to me. If I lost it,
No.
anybody could use it.
If the valet got a hold of it by
Right.
mistake when he was parking your car.
Exactly.
Yep.
Whereas my phone, you could get it, but you'd have to unlock it, and you can't.
Yep. And so the beauty is this leverages all of the work that Apple
Right.
has done on security and biometrics and privacy. Unfortunately, they adopted Fido,
Right.
which is a separate key pair per site. And so you have to synchronize it. You got to use the cloud, and you don't end up with one key per person, which is what Squirrel is.
Yeah. How does Squirrel solve this issue of unique public keys?
So I actually have in the notes. I said, the entire Squirrel idea hit me after I had visited one of Dan Bernstein's cryptography site pages, and I have the link, cr.yp.to/ecdh.html. That's elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. So on that page, Dan mentioned that to create, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see some C code, 3 lines of C code, right there, those 3 lines. So he explains, he mentioned that to create a private key using his curve 25519, you took any random 256 bits of entropy, turned 2 specific bits off, and 1 bit on, and you had a valid private key. And from that, you could derive its matching public key. What I realized that morning at IHOP when I was working on SpinRite 6.1, it just hit me like a flash of lightning. I realized that rather than starting with a completely random 256 bits of entropy, we could instead start with a 256-bit hash of a domain name.
Oh,
and turn that into a private key.
Smart.
And that was it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So each domain has a unique private key.
It automatically gets calculated.
Now, I save that on my end, yes?
Yes.
So we could do the handshake.
Yes. So we hash the domain name. But it's a keyed hash, right? Remember
Right.
the HMAC? It is a cryptographic. So it's a keyed hash. So that key is your one thing. Your identity as Leo is the key for the hash. That means that when you hash Amazon.com and I hash Amazon.com, with our different keys, we get different private keys. So your identity it keys the hash of the domain name to create a private key, and you don't have to store it because it creates it every time you need it. You say, what domain do you want to log on to? And it says, oh, in that case, this is your private key.
It's very simple and fast. Yeah.
It's so, yes. Yeah. I mean, it's just the right answer.
Right.
So I guess if I was guilty of anything, it was of not evangelizing this thing and spending a lot of time pounding on people and being like Stina Evansfard.
It wasn't. It would have been a pretty uphill battle.
That was my worry. Fido already was rolling and had steam, and I was I spent 7 years on this, and I dropped SpinRite 6.1, and I'm so happy I'm back to SpinRite 6.1 now.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is the problem with Fido 2 and with Passkeys. And so my advice would be wait until a third-party independent solution exists. If you start creating passkeys with Apple, maybe they're going to show the passkey on a QR code. I don't think so. There's just no way. See, they like this lock-in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. They don't want to change a thing.
Nope. So it means that when you create when you register with an account on your iPad, Apple will synchronize it in the same way they do our messages right now, and and then your phone will know the passkey that the iPad generated on the fly, and add it to your collection of passkeys.
Wow.
But you end up with hundreds of them.
Okay, Steve. You're right. The world is wrong, damn it. But this is the world people like you have to live in, I'm sorry to say.
Oh, I love this world.
I'm just going to quickly see if I can convert that long number.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Number to install an Emacs package here. Oh, can't find it. Oh, well. Next time.
Next time. Perfect.
I bet you Emacs would do it happily.
Wow. I want to hear that. I want to see
Lisp has a integer that's called big num that is not tied to the register size. It could just go and go and go and go. It's one thing Lisp does very well. Mr. Gibson, you are the man, and they should have just damn well listened to you about Squirrel, gosh darn it. But, that's the world we live in.
Yep.
If you wish to hear this show at a 16 kilobit version.
Sounding like a squirrel.
Sounds like Thomas Edison on a cylinder. Or you wish to read along. Those are quite nice. Elaine Ferris writes those out as we speak. Or the 64 kilobit audio. Steve's got all of that at his website, grc.com. Now, while you're at grc.com, first of all, set aside a few hours because it's a rabbit hole you're going to want to go down. There's all sorts of good stuff, free stuff, things like Shields Up. But there's also his bread and butter, which is called SpinRite, the world's best mass storage maintenance and recovery utility. If you have a SSD or a hard drive, you need SpinRite. 6.0 is the current version. Imminently, Steve will use 6.1. If you buy 6.0 now, of course, you'll get a free upgrade to 6.1. You'll also be able to participate in the ongoing development, which, I say that, it's pretty much done, I think, right? I mean, just a few little I's to
all
dot.
the hard stuff is behind us,
Yeah.
and now it's a matter of sort of re-gluing the front end to the new back end, and that's what I'm in the process of doing.
Do not use wallpaper paste. That's all I'm saying. You should go to grc.com, get SpinRite, support Steve, and by the way, get a great tool that will be very useful to you down the road. We have a show at our website that shows 64 kilobit audio and video, actually, at twit.tv/SN. There's also a YouTube channel. So if you want to share it, for instance, if you heard something and you said, somebody's got to hear this, you can go to that YouTube channel and just get that little snippet. There's also, of course, it's a podcast, so you can just go to any podcast player and subscribe. Search for Security Now. You should be able to find it, and that way you'll get it automatically every Tuesday, the minute we're done here. We record the show 1:30 Pacific. That's 4:30 Eastern, 20:30 UTC. You can watch us do it live.twit.tv. There's audio and video streams there. People who watch live often like to chat live. We have a wonderful chat room where they're all talking about what you're talking about. That's irc.twit.tv. We also have a fabulous Discord chat that is unique to members of the club. Club Twit has some real benefits, among which are ad-free versions of all of our shows. Access, I'm on the wrong one. That's the tech guy. Let's go to Security Now. Access to the Discord. You see, every show has a Discord channel, but not just that. Every geek topic under the sun has a Discord channel. This is for club members, but it's an inclusive club. Lots of fun people in here. We have our own Minecraft server. We have shows that are unique to the club, like our Untitled Linux show and Stacy's Book Club. That's coming up, by the way, on the 16th. Termination Shock by Neil Stephenson. Great book. Long book, though, if you want to join us. I think I'll be joining Ant because I'm loving this book and I want to talk about it. Tuesday, June 16th at 9 a.m. Of course, you can listen after the fact on our Twit Plus feed where things like this go. There's a members-only fireside chat coming up July 7th on the 16th of next month. Alex Lindsay and Ask Me Anything. Steve's did one some time ago. We still want you to do a vitamin D special or something like that. You've got a lot of health things you could talk about. It'd be kind of fun.
I do.
I know you're busy.
No time.
I know.
And just to follow up, the one reason you can't use one key for all your sites is then you lose anonymity.
Oh, yes.
It would be
good point.
It would be trackable totally. You'd have
Excellent
no anonymity
point.
from one website to the next.
Yes.
That's why they create them randomly.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. And you solved it. You do have though the burden of keeping a vault with all of those numbers in it. And that's why you have cloud. But those things can be leaked without harm, right? Because no one else has the private key.
Correct.
Yeah. Twit members, Club Twit members, or non-members, if you want to join, $7 a month, twit.tv/clubtwit. There's corporate memberships available too. There's also yearly memberships. We kind of discourage that. But some people say, I don't want a monthly bill. I just want to pay once. Okay, fine. Twit.tv/clubtwit. Well, that's it. Are you watching any good TV?
We're currently watching The Good Doctor.
Yeah. That goes a long time because there was the original one and then they made The Good Doctor, so you got many, many episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's by the creator of House, and of course that was House was a classic series.
Good.
So yeah, we're watching that, and we've got a backlog of things. Everyone is saying that the Lincoln Lawyer on Netflix is really good.
I loved the movie.
I did too.
Yeah,
and so
I'll have to look at that.
Apparently the series is worth doing.
Excellent. I always ask Steve for recommendations for books and movies and TV shows. He's got good taste. Thanks, Steve. We'll see you next time on Security Now.
Bye.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor of Ad Astra Magazine, and each week I'm joined by Tarek Malik, the editor-in-chief over at Space.com, in our new This Week in Space podcast. Every Friday, Tarek and I take a deep dive into the stories that define the new space age. What's NASA up to? When will Americans once again set foot on the moon? And how about those samples from the Perseverance rover? When are those coming home? What the heck has Elon Musk done now? In addition to all the latest and greatest in space exploration, we'll take an occasional look at bits of spaceflight history that you probably never heard of, and all with an eye towards having a good time along the way. Check us out on your favorite podcatcher.
Security Now.